You're listening to ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio, with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. This episode is sponsored by Kingsway Soft. Check out their version 6 release of the SSIS Productivity Pack, featuring 7 new components, including support for Azure Blob Storage, Google Sheets, and a new data profiler transformation component. Kingsway Soft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 70 countries and regions rely on Kingsway Soft to integrate data with various business systems in order to drive their business efficiency and fully leverage the information assets. Check out their website at kingswaysoft.com. We thank Kingsway Soft for sponsoring ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio.
Hey, Joel, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Trying to avoid the doldrums of January, where it seems like it's always going to be dreary and cold for the rest of your life.
I tell you what, I've been, after watching a lot of the forecasts in the East Coast, Northeast especially, I mean, they start to feel a little bit what it's like in Minnesota.
Yeah, I kind of want to start a telethon for our poor friends in Florida who are suffering through the 50s right now.
For today's episode, I was hoping I might be able to pose a bit of a challenge I have and hope you might have a solution.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and what I'd like to go into is just around the topic of social media. Using Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, I try to embrace these and do it in a productive way that doesn't just take a bunch of my time, and I feel like I'm on a seesaw where I either spend way too much time kind of getting posts ready and posting them and retweeting things and whatever, and I haven't found that synergy across the various social media platforms and being able to schedule posts and that kind of thing. So I'm hoping you might be able to help me out here, because you seem to really have at least a lot of content going out there. Maybe you feel similar, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, well, I think I actually go in spurts where I'll have a bunch of stuff all at once and then go a few days without. The nice thing about, I guess, doing the podcasts and having on our network having 3 episodes a week, and the fact that I'm kind of the guy who tweets stuff out, it gives me a pretty steady stream of content to put out there. And so I like my email strategy. I like to live in the future. Sure. I don't like to be doing it real time, because you got a job, you got a family, and it's hard to keep up with that, and it's hard to maintain that. But the people who do it really well, and I would credit somebody like Mark Smith, who does our Dynamics 365 Practice podcast. He does this really well, and I've learned some things from him and from others about tools that work. I started with tools like Clout and Hootsuite, and those tools are okay, but there were some things I didn't like about them. They weren't necessarily the most flexible to work with. But then I discovered Buffer. And Buffer, if you aren't familiar with it, is a pretty popular tool that lets you manage multiple social profiles and makes it really easy to maintain a queue of content, so that as you see things, as you read things, you can add it to your queue, and they make it easy to do both from your computer and from your phone. So if you use iOS or Android, they've got a sharing widget. So I'm reading something, I want to tweet it out, I want to put it on LinkedIn, I can from there share it, just like if I'm going to email it or text it to somebody, and it adds it to the queue. Now, I have accidentally added it to the wrong account before, so that's something you got to be careful with, but that makes it a lot easier. And those services will also space things out so you're tweeting or posting on LinkedIn at an optimal time. You can set the time ranges, but it's not going to put everything at midnight. Although you might find, especially if you are doing something like we do with Dynamics 365, maybe posting at midnight might be a good idea, because there's people all over the world who in the CRM community or the community that you're in, but you can set those time ranges. You can also, and I don't do this part as much. I know some people do, where you think, wow, it's like they're posting a RSS feed.
I thought you were going to go the direction of those late night developers.
Yeah, no, but some people, it seems like it's like they must be like retweeting an RSS feed. They're probably using something like Buffer, because Buffer lets you add your favorite feeds to the list, and then you can just go down the list and choose the ones you want to tweet out or post on LinkedIn. I would say use that with caution, or try and balance organic content with retweeted content or posting somebody else's content, just because, and this is just a bias of mine, but if I have somebody that the only thing they ever do is retweet somebody else, I'm not going to really follow them, or I might stop following them. Mm-hmm. So I think if you are going to do this, do what Mark Smith told me, which is don't just retweet it as is, rewrite it, add something to it, change the wording, so you're not just rehashing what everybody else is saying. And so what I've done, and again, I don't do this every week, but I have certain community sites that have kind of aggregates of blogs. I will go and go down the list and put some of them in my feed, but then also supplement that with my own content or CRM tip of the day or other things that I'm involved in or I'm writing. And the other thing is, retweeting yourself is not bad. You want to watch how much you do it, though. So I think it's okay, and it's okay to have like a second pass. So like if you write a blog post, you tweet it out right after you write it, but then schedule another one for maybe a week later or a few days later, maybe at a different time of day. Especially with Twitter, it's kind of like the stream. People don't go back and read what was last week, and so there's a good chance that the people who saw it this time won't be the ones you see it the next time. But don't be. I have some friends who will tweet the same thing 12 times. That's too much. People get sick of it.
So, Joel, as you were going through that, a couple of things come to mind for me. And the first one is when you were talking about posting content using Buffer from out to multiple social networks. Now, when you do that, are you doing it the same post that you just post all at once across the different networks? Do you stagger those across, or how do you make that go for you, or what's worked well for you?
The answer will differ based on how much time I have. If I'm in a hurry, so if I'm in what mode I'm in, and I think what I've realized is you really got to get an understanding of why you're doing this social media stuff, because if you don't, it can really become a kind of a monster. And I have a clear goal when I've got my hat on promoting CRM audio, and that I want to get the word out. Hey, we got a new episode. Here's what it's about. So in those cases, I will generally try and say about the same thing, but I'll change it up based on the network. For example, Twitter, since you've got the shorter characters, even though it's grown to, 280 characters now or something like that, you still have less room. Whereas a LinkedIn type post, I generally put more detail into it just because you got more to work with. One thing I would say that I don't like about Buffer, and it's not Buffer's fault. Any of these tools, Hootsuite, Buffer, any of these, you can't tag people in posts. You can with Twitter, but if I want to say we got a new episode with Matthew Anderson on LinkedIn and Facebook, I can't tag you in it. So what I'm finding I'm doing is coming back after the post is posted and then editing it to add those tags, which I wish that Facebook and LinkedIn would open that up, so it would make my life easier anyway. I still find, especially like the image in the post, I have to go look at it once it posts just to make sure the image looks good, because sometimes it'll look good in LinkedIn but won't look good in Facebook or vice versa.
Got it. Now, are you using Buffer for everything, or are there some things that you're going in and kind of creating separately, either through another tool, or using something like if this then that, or a flow, or anything like that for like some special use case?
For my personal blog, I do have WordPress set to automatically tweet and post on Facebook. There again, it's not perfect. It will basically post the first so many characters of the post, and it also doesn't. If you would put like formatting like bullet points or spaces, it doesn't reflect that too. So I guess it depends on what your motive is. If you're promoting a brand versus just my personal blog, I think the standards there are different. If you're a social media manager for a company, you want to make sure everything's perfect. For the rest of us, I think most people are okay with it being something that doesn't look perfect. Although I will say, having pictures in your post is one thing that I found does get more people to click on it if there's an interesting picture or something related to it versus text. Usually, that's not always the case, but. And again, it all comes to what your goals are. If your goal is to get a lot of eyeballs, get a lot of clicks, then you want to do everything to get it optimized. If you're just sharing some fun thoughts with your friends, and that's where I separate, is the personal stuff. Something crazy that I'll post on my personal Facebook wall is usually just something that pops into my mind based on something I'm doing at the time, and I'm not going to schedule those out. It's more the things, and to me, it's more just to keep up with it because. I've got the CRM Audio Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. I've got the CRM Tip of the Day Twitter and Facebook. I've got the ProdCast Twitter account. All this stuff, I can't individually log in as each of those and post on a regular basis, but that's where a tool like Buffer helps. And that's where I think the tool that you choose will be based on how much that you're doing. If you're somebody, and I know, Matthew, you've got multiple accounts as well, a tool like Buffer would be very helpful for you probably. But if you're somebody who has maybe just your personal account or one or two accounts, then it might be overkill. And that's where Buffer, having a free version for people that have one or two accounts, is a good thing. There's another tool that my buddy Chris Huntingford, who is the tattooed CRM guy on Twitter. You may have seen some of his stuff. He's said he's trying this tool called Social Pilot. It's socialpilot.co. It's a lot like Buffer, similar pricing to Buffer if you have like the $10 a month tier. The difference there is they let you go to the next level and do things like import tweets or posts from CSV or Excel. So if you really, we're doing this a lot, like if you were an actual social manager or really managing multiple accounts, posting multiple times a day, something like that might be worth considering too.
Well, I sure hope I am not at a point where I'm trying to post quite that often. Going back to the comment you had around, you said it a couple of times, but just having a plan for how you're using social media. I feel like for me, that might be part of where I run into some of my problems, because I think, when I mentioned the seesaw before of how I'm using social media, I think some of that is, part of it is engagement in a conversation. Part of it is promotion of, whether it's blog posts or podcast episodes or what have you, or even just, responding to interesting tidbits of news that are within the work that I do or adjacent to the work that I do. I think that I have different levels of priority or different levels where those are influencing them at different times. So kind of going back to that, and then based on some of the how of that's being used, then put together something, maybe try out Buffer. You've sold me, Joel. But, try out Buffer, get some things scheduled out there. I've tried using that in Hootsuite previously. I've run into some challenges with that before. Maybe Buffer is what I need to be able to get through it, or, one of these other ones is probably worth testing a few out, and maybe catching up a little bit later in the year in an episode, see where things have netted out, what I've learned.
So you're talking about knowing your motivation for using social media, and that it ties in a lot with some stuff I've been thinking about reading lately. I just realized, and we live in very tumultuous times where there's all kinds of stuff that is going on that people feel very strongly about, as I do, and I'm sure you do as well. But it's like there's this new social norms that make you feel like you need to say something about everything, and that if you don't, somebody's going to think I don't care about topic X because I haven't posted a bunch of stuff online about it, and so, or I need to say happy birthday to everybody I ever knew, otherwise I'm not keeping up the new social norm. It's kind of like the new social code, if that makes sense. And it's, if you go too far with it, I just find it very stressful and just makes me want to pull my hair out and just shut down everything.
Yeah, no,
Have you noticed that?
I tend to agree with you. It feels, kind of related to some of the fear of missing out concept, where you don't want to miss out on those opportunities to be engaged with other people or be part of a conversation. And where a lot of those are happening is, whether it's on Twitter or on Facebook or what have you. It's interesting for me because I've made a certain amount of peace with Facebook, where I don't post a lot of the personal updates that I used to, say, a decade ago on Facebook. I've really transitioned it to more of a platform where I may engage in some other conversations that are going on there, but I largely use it for some very specific collaboration areas around, interest groups, private Facebook groups, and that kind of thing, where I'll be engaged, but kind of the public timeline ends up getting turned off because it's just it becomes stressful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it can and besides that, it can become very time consuming, and it's technology in general is designed to prolong your engagement with it. So that's social media. That's also your phones. That's also just technology in general is how can we increase the amount of engagement? Because you saw in the last week, Mark Zuckerberg announced they were changing the Facebook feed to include more things from friends and family and less news, based due to some of the stuff around the election and propaganda and fake news and things like that. And the stock dropped because the investors were concerned that it was going to drive people to spend less time on the service, which I think says a lot for a lot of the motivation of the people who are in there. So
I read it's funny taking that in context, though. I mean, I know we don't do a lot of news analysis and that kind of thing, but it wasn't that long ago when Facebook was going public, and there was a lot of question of, can they monetize? How are they going to really be able to monetize this in a way that people care about? Fast forward to the recent history now, and the question is, oh, you mean they might take the foot off the gas a little bit there? But no, that's, we count on that. That's where a lot of that value actually is in the stock price today, not just a promise. So it's really interesting there.
Right. So I read an article, and this was written by a former Google employee named Tristan Harris, and basically it's about how technology hijacks your mind and uses tricks. And the rewards that we get from our cell phones is similar to the reward you get from a slot machine. Every time you pick it up, you have the intermittent variable rewards. You might not get something, you might get something good, but it's kind of like you feel like you got to keep going back, and kind of the addictive properties of that, and designers doing things to make the user's actions, like checking Facebook or checking notifications, to give them a reward. And it's not you get a reward every time, but it's just the promise that there might be something big there that I'm missing that makes you keep doing it.
Yeah. I have seen that article that you're talking about. I know you hit on a few of the key components there, and it's so true, whether it's some of the social media items, games, and just the way they're really designed around trying to keep you engaged with everything that they do, and they employ various psychological tools to be able to do that. It feels like the comparison to a slot machine is a very apt one, even though the good old fashioned one-armed bandit may be out of style, and those are all digital too. But
right,
yeah.
Right. It also mentioned, like we talked about, the reciprocity, where you feel like you owe people something. It points out, I didn't notice this until I read this, that it's not a coincidence that it puts the people the invitations in LinkedIn are next to the suggested people you might know. Mm-hmm. And so you get this invitation from somebody on LinkedIn saying, oh, Matthew Anderson sent me an invite. I need to accept that. I need to send him something. When really you just probably checked a bunch of boxes and said, oh, Joel's there. Yeah, I know him. And then went on. So it puts it's all this is vying for our time, and it's the challenges, and kind of what makes me look at how can I be more productive isn't so I can get more done in a day. It's how can I make these tools serve me rather than me being at their mercy.
Yeah, and fit in with priorities, right? Just kind of back to not just how and why are you using social media and so forth, but is it part of a deliberate thing that I'm trying to do versus just something that I'm being drawn into? I mean, that agency there seems to be really, really important to grab that perspective and look at.
Right. So a couple weeks ago, I did what's called a technology Sabbath for a day, and it was only a day. It was 24 hours. It was actually part of this group that I'm in that gives you challenges every week, and one of the challenges for that week was take a social media Sabbath. And so it was basically shut off all technology. Now you can't shut off all technology. You probably have to drive somewhere in your car. You probably still want to run the heat in your house if it's wintertime. But talking about things like things with a screen, so your computers, phones, televisions, if you want to go there, and So I shut my Wi-Fi off. My kids hated it, by the way, which was kind of funny in itself. It was almost worth it just to see their reactions. Like, hey, YouTube isn't working. Yeah, that's on the Wi-Fi too. So, but it was good, and you could tell. I think that's good to do periodically, just to tell, am I a little bit? I don't want to say addicted, because I think that minimizes real addiction. But is it? How important is it to me, and is it really giving me value versus me feeling like I need to do it? And you'll be amazed by how much more time you have, and it's kind of like taking a break from eating sugar for a few days. Things taste better after that. So again, it was an interesting experience. And if you feel like things are crazy and you're too busy, it's interesting to do that, just to take that variable out and see how much is that really adding to my stress and adding to my feeling of busyness, and just kind of reset your priorities.
Yeah, right on. I've not done that, but it sounds intriguing. I may have to.
Yeah, just go unplug your router. That's what I did. And you should probably tell your wife before you do it.
Fair enough. We just got a Switch here recently. She'll have to stay local while she plays.
Yeah, you'll have to just make sure your games are downloaded and you're ready to play offline, and you'll be good to go.
There we go.
This has been ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. You can follow Matthew at his blog, connectingthedata.com, or on Twitter at MC Anderson. You can follow Joel Lindstrom on Twitter at Joel Lindstrom. You can subscribe to the CRM Audio network of podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, or any place else that offers fine podcasts. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC.